Welcome to DC Talks. I am your host, Drew Kreisman. With me is my brother, Ira Kreisman, and on this episode, we continue our conversation on The Secret of Nimh. When last we left our heroes, we were getting deeply embroiled in the inner workings of rat politics.
Yeah.
True, right?
Exactly correct.
Right. And also, the Auntie Shrew had kidnapped the bird, Jeremy.
To be fair, he came to the Brisby house and she was like defending the homestead.
Fair enough.
Tied him up, to be sure. Captured. She captured him.
She captured him, as it were. And Mrs. Brisby, the hero of our story, is in the middle of her quest to find Nicodemus. As much as she had just sort of, as I mentioned, gotten herself embroiled a bit into the politics, she is just learning about this whole enormous rat society now and has one singular goal, which is to find Nicodemus, who the great owl told her can help move her home so that her sick child, who has pneumonia, won't be, obliterated by a tractor.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Quite the story.
And it's worth remembering, though she had very little to do with it, she did just get the Council of Rats to agree that they needed to help because
right.
they know Jonathan and want to help his widow. So Jenner, who's got ulterior motives, is like 1,000 pardons and so on and so forth.
Oh, madam, and all that.
So we leave the children tying Jeremy back up, and we're back with Aegis and Brisby. And he continues to instruct her. He says, so it does that really neat voice acting thing I like. This has got to be a volume control. I don't know how this works. Sound engineering, sure. I guess.
Yeah.
We start from far back and we zoom in on them and their voices at the same time.
Yeah. So it goes from sort of distant and echoey, as if they're really far off, to much clearer and cleaner.
Right. And he says, don't tire him out. She says, no, be brief. Yes. Say what you want and leave. I won't be a bother. So I do like Mr. Aegis. He's kind of the Sid, the Final Fantasy Sid of this story. But man, he does not trust her to behave in a way that he thinks is appropriate.
Right.
I don't get it. He just continues to do this. So they get to the door, and now he's kind of on Justin. Justin bothers him enough with all his silly nonsense. I don't know what Nicodemus sees in that boy.
Yeah. On the one hand, to your point, he is very gruff and whatever with Mrs. Brisby, but he's also like that with Justin. He doesn't. Right. He is just kind of a busybody, grumpy old man in a lot of ways, right? Just kind of talks over everybody. But you're right. It is an interesting and not particularly attractive character trait.
So she reaches to open the door, and the latch opens automatically, and a bunch of light and wind and sparks comes out of Nicodemus's chamber, lair, study.
Right.
Like, was it high pressure in there? Was he doing magic that made it high pressure in the room? So when he opens the door, all the equilibrium setting blows her
flying about. Yeah.
It seems a little unnecessary,
but it looks cool.
It does. So she goes in and she approaches, and it's kind of this dim cave, and we see Nicodemus for the first time from the front, because we saw his reflection at one point, and we've seen his hands a couple times, and he's sitting on a chair on a little dais, and he mostly just sits in the chair, which is, I think, meant to indicate that he's not going to move any more than he has to.
Right.
He's advanced in age at this point.
Yeah.
He's wearing these long purple and black robes. His eyes are always glowing yellow. He's got these huge eyebrows, even better than Jenner's.
Yeah.
Very long mustaches. And he beckons her closer. Don't be frightened. She says, the great owl sent me to, and he goes, oh, did he? Like, hang on, old man, we know that you know. Is he talking down to her also, or is he just being Playful. I don't get a read on this very well. When I was a kid, I thought he was pretending to not know, even though I thought he was being a jerk when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now I wonder
interesting. Yeah, I always thought he was being kind of playful.
Right. I hope that's what it is. What it is. So so Nicodemus claims the owl to be a dear comrade. Please come closer. I wonder if his eyesight is failing, even though his eyes glow.
Sure.
And when she finally gets close enough, he says, "Mrs. Jonathan Brisby, what an honor this is."
Ah.
So I like that he is, even if he's teasing her a little bit, he is being formal. He's being polite. Right. This is Mrs. Jonathan Brisby, the widow of my dear friend. And I believe him when he says this is an honor, because the woman who captured the heart of our little hero friend Mouse, it should be an honor. It would not have been prudent for him to have met her at the wedding, right? He didn't go to the wedding. He hasn't met the family. Sure. Because we can't let everybody know about his magic and what happened at Nimh and so on that we're about to get.
Right.
So she says, and she stammers, and I feel like this is another one of those things that this movie and maybe some of the other Don Bluth movies do that you wouldn't get in a modern voice-acted movie.
Sure.
She says, how does it that everyone knows Jonathan?
Yeah.
And now we get the backstory, and this is one of the scariest parts. The owl part was scary. This part is also scary.
Why is this so horrifying, man?
Don Bluth liked to scare children. There's an interview where he talks about it's important for kids to have like safe, scary movies.
Yeah.
So Nicodemus says Jonathan was a great friend to the rats of Nimh. He himself came from Nimh. And she starts to go into her pitch. She calls him Your Majesty, which is funny. She's starting to explain. He says, I know of your needs, but right now it's time for exposition. So there is a book there. Read the words. And she says, I can read a little. Jonathan taught me.
Yeah. That's one of those lines. We did a bunch when we were talking about Ninja Turtles, and we acted some out, and we've done a few during this. But that's one of those things, and I don't know why, but the way she just does, I can read a little. Jonathan taught me. There's a musicality to it, and to her kind of joy that she has a skill that's going to help her to understand better, and that it's tied to her husband, and so there's this connective tissue of the hidden hero of the story, who she of course loved, who gets to now continue to help, and she gets to be a help too, in such a small thing too, because we think of being able to read as so fundamental and foundational, but it wasn't always, right? And for a society, I guess, of, we're about to get into it a little bit or whatever, but of beings that are newer to intelligence, the very concept of reading is incredible and fascinating, right? And so I just love both that she's so excited that she can read, but also that delivery of the line. I feel like there's so much in there.
She also says that the children are better at it than she is. And I wonder if some of Jonathan's newly acquired intelligence was passed down to the kids.
Interesting. Sure.
So she approaches the lectern on which this book rests, and it levitates and opens automatically, and it shines this bright light on her, so she's at the same time she's talking to Nicodemus about the kids being better at reading than she is suddenly stunned by the magic around her.
Yeah, me too.
There's a bunch of sparkles, and the glow bathes her. And again, all the different uses of colors for this one character is stunning to me. So she begins to read haltingly, and I don't think I can do that justice. The way the voice actor does this is incredible.
It's really amazing.
So I'm just going to read it straight. She says, Jonathan Brisby made possible the rat's escape from the terrible cruelty of Nimh, And then she has a moment where she's talking to herself, Jonathan. Oh. And this is obviously Nicodemus's diary now, because he was killed today while drugging the farmer's cat, Dragon.
She stutters on the word killed.
Yes.
Which is, again, of note, as we're talking about all these choices, so intentional. So she's struggling to read at times, but then she's also just struggling to say out loud what happened. You know, there's sort of a double meaning to that stutter on the word. Jonathan was killed today. And it's, it's so beautiful.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And she stops. So she stops here. And this is what the entry Nicodemus was writing as he was saying something else in the introduction.
Right. We pointed that out at the beginning, yeah.
So she says, I never knew what happened. Why did he never tell me about any of you? And now he's going to go to his secondary exposition device. I think you called it a mirror an episode or two ago. It's like a sphere that spins. It's mirror-like, I guess. I don't want to be too pedantic, but I do want to be a little. Yes.
So how dare I?
Surviving from Middle Earth to now. Okay.
I don't know where Nicodemus got a Palantir. Yeah, I just, good on him.
Nim must have had it. Whatever.
Sure.
Okay, so he points to that, and she goes up to this thing, and it starts spinning. And he says, to answer that, I must tell you about Nimh and our plan. So the thing spins, and it spits lightning and sparks and magic. And then we get a flashback. So now we're outside the farm, and we're in a city. And it's kind of dirty, and it's dark. And there are these people capturing rats in an alleyway. And then we shift scenes to this. It looks like the saddest pet shop in the world.
Yeah.
There are puppies and monkeys and bunnies, and the puppies make sad puppy noises. And Nicodemus narrates. He says, in the beginning, we were only ordinary street rats, stealing our daily bread and living off the efforts of man's work. So I feel like there's a metaphor in there somewhere.
Buy that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, he said street rats, and my brain jumped. Continue.
So I feel like there's a metaphor in the living off the efforts of man's work, because I questioned earlier when they were talking about stealing electricity from the farmers, like why is it that big a deal? Are we talking about different kinds of governments, different types of societies? What kind of societies are superior to others?
Sure.
But here it feels like just as rats, it's not that big a deal, because that's the only way to survive. I feel like Nicodemus and the people who support his plan are saying that now that we know enough about how things work, being intelligent, being able to read about how society could work or should work, we can do better than to just leech off the work of these farmers.
Sure. Yeah.
If we assume the rats are not inferior to the humans, right? They've got this working society, then really they're leeching off the common man. And maybe they don't want to be that guy.
Right.
So he continues with the narration. We were captured, put in cages, and sent to a place called Nimh. There are many animals there, in cages. Sad puppy sounds.
Yeah.
They were put through the most unspeakable tortures to satisfy some scientific curiosity.
This is one of those things that was actually far more common right before and around the time that you and I were kids, that I've learned more about, where we actually have made a ton of progress. But I remember sometimes you would see commercials for products when we were young, and they would say, like, no animal testing in the making of this, right? And now it's it's a given in most places. It hasn't been completely eradicated, but it's one of the few things where we can kind of take a look at the course of our lifetimes and be like, yeah, this is something where it's just no longer accepted that you experiment on animals. Like, we still use certain animals for certain testing and things. And like I said, the problem hasn't been solved. I don't want to, and I'm certainly not an expert in it, but it used to be just fairly common that like your makeup would have been, everything was at some point, some horrible torture had to become some innocent creature of the world just to create lipstick. Really?
Right.
So we've at least mostly stopped doing that.
Right. And there are significant rules about testing on living beings, especially humans.
Yeah.
About what is and is not acceptable and who bears the burden of risk and who's going to benefit from it. And not just what Nicodemus suggests here is that they're running experiments just to run them, not with any beneficial goal in mind.
Right. And I also can't help but wonder what pieces of art like this, did for that conversation. I'm a big believer in, and this is maybe confirmation bias of, art or life imitates art, imitates life and all of that. But that even things we've talked about over the years, things like representation, right? And what you see on the screen and what we see in stories can help shape how people view the world. And I wonder if, some generations raised on these stories of anthropomorphic mice and stuff, and even direct imagery like this, seeing it in the story and saying, we shouldn't treat animals like that. I hope that, it played some small part or maybe some large part, you never know, in helping to make a change, because I believe that art can help make a change in the world. So it's kind of interesting to go back and see it as both kind of indicative of its time, but also as potentially part of the solution that came from its time.
20 rats and 11 mice were given injections. Our world began changing. And then we get the trippy Wonka tunnel. The music picks up. The music is scary. There's it looks like DNA double helixes that sort of morph into bones, and the light is in and out, and it's this tunnel, and it's dark, and it's scary, and this this rat is in pain, and it's just horrifying, and it goes on for a good 10, 15 seconds.
It gives Jekyll and Hyde vibes, right? With the way it starts screaming in the shadow, and all of the lighting is intense. It's really discomforting. Yeah, it's I like the Willy Wonka comparison too, like to that tunnel. It's just I was always really bothered by this. The needles, by the way, right before this, with the big old needles, because you're a rat, so a needle looks huge to them, and
right.
It's got more of those weird liquid in the glass tubes, and it doesn't quite go full elephants on parade here, but it's right.
Yep, that's a good call. That's a good reference.
Yeah.
It is unpleasant on purpose.
Yes.
And so it does that for, like I said, a good 15, 20 seconds, and then it cuts off, and the music gets real chill. And we're still in the sad pet shop of horrors.
Right, totally.
But it's much calmer. And we zoom in on a cage, and we can see a little sign, and the sign says, "To open door, lift latch." And Nicodemus says, "Then, one night, I looked upon the words under the cage door and understood them. We had become intelligent. We could read. The miracle was kept secret from the scientists, and in the quiet of the night, we escaped through the ventilation system." So the experiments, whatever it was, made the rats and mice intelligent, and they learned to read by having, bigger brains? Not clear.
Sure.
Not clear.
Right, yeah, the mechanics of it, that's where we get a little comic booky. And I think it's kind of funny. I'm always interested in where people will or won't draw the lines in speculative fiction, right? What is believable? What is, that's a really good explanation for why this thing works. And people have various issues with the Force, for example, in Star Wars, right? When does it make sense? When does it not? Answer, it never makes sense.
It's all made up. It does whatever we say it does.
Sure. But sometimes people do make meticulous internal rules for their magic systems or whatever and try to follow those. But this is one of those things that it's just kind of it's the Peter Parker gets bitten by a radioactive spider, and that allows him to do this. Like, why does being bitten by a spider allow him to do these 15 things? It just does. That's
because
what it did.
It does. Because that's the story.
It's what I wrote, because that's what I wrote on the page. It's right here. Yeah.
And if they had to like learn phonics first, this would be a much less succinct story.
Yeah, right. Sure. I also find it interesting that they don't just learn to read immediately, but they also gain a sense of intuition to not let the humans know that they can read. Like they've already got sort of, they don't just understand words, but they have thinking forward several steps and understanding consequences and potential, so that's quite a bit of intelligence to get overnight, essentially.
Well, and I do wonder how much of that are the instincts from being street rats.
Sure.
I don't buy that. But like you said, they're thinking several steps ahead, and I like that observation. The other thing I wonder is, because there's no magic in the book, did these experiments give Nicodemus access to magic?
Sure. That would make the most sense. Presumably he wasn't running around casting spells on the streets of New York or whatever, wherever they were.
Well, or if unlocking his intelligence, right, for whatever reason, his intelligence unlocked further and gave him magic powers. It doesn't really matter. Like I've said several times, I think for this movie specifically, it doesn't really matter, but I do wonder about these sorts of things.
Yeah. It's fascinating, to be sure.
All right, so he explains then that they escaped through the ventilation shafts, and this series of events continues to be horrifying.
Yeah.
Because we see them going through the shafts, the mice are being blown away.
Yeah.
Into the darkness and squeaking in terror.
Yeah.
And only Jonathan and Mr. Aegis make it out.
Right.
They made grappling hooks and had ropes and so on. And they manage to get to the top with the rats, and they're locked in. And Jonathan is the one who realizes, oh, I'm so much smaller than these guys. And he's able to sneak out or like squeeze out and unlock the door, unlock the shaft cover or whatever, and let everybody out. So that's why Jonathan is considered to be such a hero, because he's very clever and he was small enough, and Mr. Aegis is clever in a different way, I guess.
Right. Without him, literally, they wouldn't have made it out. So you owe a guy like that. You feel like you owe a guy after something like that.
Well, and then after they got to the Fitzgibbons farms, it's not like he stopped with his heroics. He allied with the Great Owl. Right. So the vision fades, and Mrs. Brisby, she's watching this scene play out, and Jonathan is standing there very heroic and proud of himself, and she's just watching him. And as it fades, she gets very sad. Yeah. She hasn't seen her husband in who knows how long. And now she gets to see him again, and then he's gone. Yeah. All right. So now Nicodemus says, I have a gift for you. Come here. Jonathan meant it for you. And he opens this box, and inside is that amulet he was holding at the beginning. Yeah. It's a bright red stone in a gold setting with a golden necklace. Sparkly. And she says, oh, it's so beautiful. And he says, it sleeps. When worn by one with a courageous heart, the stone glows red. It becomes a blinding radiance. Courage of the heart is very rare. The stone has a power when it's there. And she turns it over, and there's an inscription. And she reads the inscription. You can unlock any door if you only have the key. So I've got a couple questions. Okay. Well, we'll start with the easy one. Drew, do you know what the key is in this instance?
It's the thing that unlocks the door.
There's a song that you have said you don't like in this movie.
I said no such thing.
that is very clear about what the key is. Do you remember?
Love, I believe.
Love is the key.
It was the thing that she sang to. Yeah.
So we talk a lot in Final Fantasy about how they will often give you the end at the beginning.
Yeah.
Now
sure.
we're in the middle, but they have made it very clear about what the key to surviving everything that's about to come is going to be. And I think that's fantastic.
It is.
My other question is, where did the
Yes.
stone come from?
No idea.
Did they make it? Did
Yeah,
they
right?
find it?
Yeah. I also have this question. That's all I've got for you on that one.
Right. Yeah. So did some ancient mouse wizards create this? Had they
course.
been experimented
Sure.
upon by Nim?
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't matter.
What you
but
want
I do.
is the Secret of Nimh prequel. Well, now, you mentioned there, the book and stuff. I would imagine gets into some of how the society was formed a little bit. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't read it.
I haven't read it since elementary school.
Sure.
But there was no amulet, right? There was no magic, so none of that was there.
No, I like to believe, and again, this is just because to me everything is Final Fantasy. Yes, there is an ancient order, ancient being, a generation or two ago, because they've only been around so long, of intelligent rat people, wizards, ancient rat wizards. Yes, of course. Why wouldn't it be?
Right. Absolutely.
Passed down by the Eidolons or Espers. The rats have their own set of Espers that are different from the human Espers that you can call upon. Yeah.
So she accepts the amulet and puts it on. Nicodemus answers her previous question. I feel like he's one of those guys who hangs on to your question and doesn't answer it to begin with and then answers it later.
Once you've forgotten you asked it. You're like,
right.
Damn.
Jonathan couldn't tell you about Nimh because the injections slowed the aging process. You see, you would have grown old while he remained young. And I feel like that's something he would have had to tell her eventually.
I mean, yeah, there comes a time where, if you're dating Aragorn, and
right,
you're like, I'm much older and you look the same.
And that makes me wonder how long they've been at the farm, because the den they've created under the rosebush is massive.
Yeah.
Right? They've got all this stuff. Maybe the current farmer Fitzgibbons was a child when they showed up. Maybe he really is that old. Maybe that's part of how they created the amulet and have access to magic and so on and so forth.
Uh-huh.
So Justin shows up then, and he says, Nicodemus, the boats are ready and waiting. We can leave at any time. Nicodemus says, thank you, and says to Mrs. Brisby, shall we journey to your home? Tonight we must move your house to the protected side of the stone. And she says, the lee of the stone.
Yeah, Ira taught us what that was a couple of episodes ago.
Nicodemus and Justin and Mrs. Brisby make their way down the hallway, and we cut to Jenner and his associate. Drew, do you know the name of Jenner's associate?
This is not Brutus?
It is not Brutus, but that's what I thought also. It's not
okay.
Brutus. Brutus was apparently just guarding the entry that day. I think I said last episode that was Brutus. It's not. His name is Sullivan, which you wouldn't know just by watching the movie because it never comes up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I looked it up. So Jenner and Sullivan are conspiring, and Jenner looks every inch the villain here. He wraps himself up in his cape. He leans way down to whisper in Sullivan's ears. There's no one around, but he's very conspiratorial body language anyway.
Yeah. His voice has been lowered at least two
yeah.
2 octaves. He's real grumbly in this.
So he says, with Nicodemus out of the way, what's to stop us from taking over? And Sullivan gets right to it. Jenner, you can't kill Nicodemus.
Come on, man. What are you talking about?
Jenner says, no taste for blood, eh? What are you talking about, man?
It's got a lot of iron in it, for your information.
They've taken the animal out of you. But what if we're discovered? Listen, the Brisby house is a large cement block. In the moving, what if it should fall?
Accidentally. Bunny Rabbit quotes. He doesn't.
Right. He just does the conspiratorial hand movements.
Fall. Like Sector 7.
Ugh.
Right?
Exactly. So Jenner gets real graphic here. Cut the lines, and the weight of it will crush his bones.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey.
Grim, dude.
Yeah.
Once rid of Nicodemus, the plan will die. We can stay here as long as we like. Now, Sullivan's no dummy. He says, but what about Justin?
Yeah.
And Jenner says, leave him to me.
Yeah.
Man.
That's good villaining, man. That's good villain stuff.
It really is. So now we've got the next goal. Mrs. Brisby has finally reached the second to last adventure to get this done. But we've got the goal, and we know the villain's goal, and we're going to bring those two things together here in a minute. So Justin is rowing Mrs. Brisby and Nicodemus in a boat. They're still underground, so there's all these tunnels and warrens and stuff under the Fitzgibbons farm.
Yeah.
A snake slithers through the water,
Yeah, right.
which is horrifying in its own little way.
Yeah.
Their voices, again, are far away at first, and we sort of zoom in on it. A rock falls from the ceiling and splashes in the water. Nicodemus almost always whispers, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
And we get this conversation. Justin explains sometimes when we have a large project that takes us into the open, Mr. Aegis makes up a sleeping powder to give to Dragon. And I remember thinking that when I was a kid, whatever experiment was exploding in the Combine at the beginning of the movie had nothing to do with the movie at large. But now I wonder if Mr. Aegis was brewing up another sleeping potion for Dragon.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's why he was so, this is important, that's an emergency, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, yeah.
Mrs. Brisby asks the obvious question. How do you get him to take it?
Yeah, right.
And Justin says, well, someone must go into the farmhouse kitchen and put it in his dish. The only way into the kitchen is through a tiny hole in the floor. Aegis tried it yesterday. That's how he broke his leg.
Yeah.
Nobody else is as small as Mr. Aegis, who is part of the rats.
Right. You can deductive reasoning on this one pretty quick.
Yeah. What I want to know, though, is did he plant this idea in her head?
Right.
Because if so, that is not cool. On the other hand, he kind of feels like one of those guys who just talks.
Yeah. I think it was maybe kind of in there a little bit, hopeful. There's also that fine line between, manipulating somebody and presenting someone with a chance to help. And so many other people in the movie have been undercutting Mrs. Brisby's ability to do anything. If he's saying, hey, so...
Yeah.
At the very, so is it manipulative if he's working on that? Possibly, but I could interpret it more charitably to say that he wants to give her an opportunity to help, if that's what his aim was. Or, I'm with you, he could just be talking, and then she pipes up, because, I'd like to believe that, of course, he's concerned for her safety as well.
So I mentioned the rock that falls, and there's a big splash, and she asks what that is, and he says, oh, that's the mill. It's falling apart. And then he says, I hope it stays up there. Which is also a hint of one of the things that's to come.
Sure.
So Mrs. Brisby asks Nicodemus, what is the plan? And he says, to live without stealing, of course. It's wrong to take electricity from the farmer. My child, we can no longer live as rats. We know too much. And the camera the perspective is right on his face, and he's very expressive.
Yeah.
It's kind of intense. We know too much. We can no longer live as regular rats. So between all of that, Mrs. Brisby has got it in her head that, she wants to, of course she wants to help. She's been doing all these things. Of course she can do this. So she starts with, Your Majesty, and he just looks at her, and she sort of backs off, and then she says, well, I should go prepare the children for tonight. And he says, we shall wait here until dark. And she tries again. About Dragon, maybe? Oh, nothing. Goodbye. And she runs off, and she's like, there's this waterfall, I guess, where the mill is creating a sinkhole.
Right.
And she goes over this bridge and she stops. And it's like several moments of, do I go back? Do I not? And then she scampers back. She almost doesn't volunteer.
Yeah.
And she says, before she can stop herself, I volunteer for Dragon. And Justin, to our conversation a moment ago, says, oh, no, Mrs. Brisby, Nicodemus, this is no job for her.
No.
But she's gotten better at not letting some of these men tell her what she can and can't do, because she doesn't look at him. She looks at Nicodemus and says, please. And he says, as you wish.
Attaboy.
So Justin gives her some directions about where to meet. But what is most interesting to me here is the other rats start floating up in their boats. So it's not just them. It's like, okay, we've got a task. We're getting ready now. Our Corps of Engineers works fast.
Yeah, right.
So they start floating up. And as she leaves, she says, I must be crazy, quietly to herself. And again, in one of those ways that I feel like you wouldn't get in a modern movie with voice acting.
Yeah, yeah.
And she says it twice. She says, I must be crazy. She scampers up to that little bridge thing. And then she says again to herself, I must be crazy.
Yeah. A little bit.
So she's going home. We're above ground now. She's going through how she hops across the rocks and the lily pads and whatnot. And then we see a lily pad sort of scampering along the water, and there's a rod sticking out from underneath it. And it's Jeremy, and he is terrified.
He is stealthing.
At least he passed his stealth check. Probably not very well.
Yeah.
But he did pass.
He's rolled a 20 on that one.
So she's, what are you doing? What's going on? He's like, shh, I'm being followed. There's a crazy lady with a hat. She's got big teeth. She tied me up. And then we get our first hint of the stone potentially being a problem, because he notices it and he is immediately taken by it. Now, Jeremy's attraction to the stone is very innocent.
Sure, it's a sparkly.
As opposed to the other person who is attracted to the stone when we get there, who is extraordinarily aggressive. He's still kind of aggressive, though, because he hops out of the water. He's so much bigger than her. Yeah. He hops out of the water. He looms over her. She's back on her haunches.
Yeah.
And he's just got eyes for the stone. So he's very forward. He's very insistent. But he's like little boy enthusiastic about it.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh, a sparkly. You're wearing a sparkly. Can I hold it? Oh, please, can I? And he's a crow, and crows like sparkly things. But it's pretty intense.
Right.
Now she's trying to handle him. Jeremy, listen, I need lots and lots of string. And he goes, string, only looking at the stone.
Right.
And she says to move the block. He's like, yeah, hang on. Well, I got string. I've been saving them. She goes, oh, do you? I had no idea. So she says, okay, pay attention. Go get all the string you can. And he says, okay. And then he stops. He says, but that'll take all day. And she says, good. Get going.
Fantastic. Best news yet. Oh, he's so cute.
He makes one more comment about the stone. So he's about to leave, and then he stops. He says, I just thought I'd mention in passing, I've always wanted a sparkly of my very own. And she's had it. Will you get going? Oh, sure. Excuse me. Pardon me. Goodbye. And he flies off.
She gets increasingly mom voice throughout the conversation.
She does.
Until that final, would you get going? Just full mom. It's great.
We don't get a scene where she goes home and explains what's coming, but she must have, because later scenes it will make it clear that the kids know what's going on. So we're back. It's dark again. It's nighttime, and we are under the house. There's like a basket and a set of bottles angled in just such a way as to get to within half an inch of under the floor where there's this little hole.
Yeah.
We've got Justin and Mrs. Brisby. Lots of J names in this movie.
I know. Jeremy, Justin, Jenner. Yeah.
Jonathan. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So they're up on these bottles to get up to the little hole. And this is the mission to drug the cat dragon that Mrs. Brisby has volunteered to take on.
Secret spy agent mission of potential danger
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
espionage.
So Justin says, it won't be long now. She's washing the dishes. Here's the powder. He asks if she's scared, and she says, very. And he says, don't be. You'll be okay. She's trying to distract herself. She climbs up out from under the floor. It's kind of under a cabinet. And so she's in the shadow, and you can just see his head poking up through it as they talk. And she says, I hope I haven't upset your plans. He says, no, what makes you say that? She says, I thought I might have caused an argument. Oh, you mean Jenner. No problem. Okay.
Well, not her problem, anyway.
Yeah, well, Justin's not worried about Jenner. He should be, but he is very confident.
Yeah.
So, and as they're doing this, there's this activity going on in the kitchen. Mom's cleaning up, dad's doing whatever dad does. You can hear the cat, Dragon, meowing at the front door, and it is a vicious meow of, I'm hungry, let me in, scratching at the screen.
Yeah, not a friendly, cutesy little cat meow. No.
She's looking back and forth at the dish. He tells her, Justin says, you better leave that cape. It could get caught on something. So she takes it off and hands it to him. I find it a little uncomfortable.
It is a little weird. She feels very naked at that point. He's just like, here, get naked for me really fast. No, it's weird.
It's a little awkward, but it does show her as more of an animal than as a sapient being.
Right.
And I got to think that if the humans had seen her wearing clothes, that would have been especially weird.
Right.
So she's shaking in fear. She's looking back and forth. She's trying to distract herself. I hope I didn't cause a problem. I hope you make it to Thorn Valley. The farmer's wife, Mrs. Fitzgibbons, fills the cat bowl. Mrs. Brisby is handed the powder. She says, I don't think I can do this. And he says, yes, you can. Now take a deep breath. Concentrate on that bowl. Don't look at the door. Steady. And then Mrs. Fitzgibbons leaves the kitchen. Okay, Dragon, I'm coming. Steady. There we go. Now. And she doesn't go at first.
Yeah.
I think this is, there's sometimes, I'm not always patient in storytelling. I want to get to the thing. And sometimes you need to hold back just a beat or two more to up that tension. She doesn't go, and and then she goes. And it's intense.
Yeah.
So now we're on the level of the mouse. Like, this is a flat floor, right? But from her level, they give it like a horizon curve.
Right.
And she sprints for it. And she's got the packet, and she gets all the way to the bowl, and she puts it in there. And like, as she does it, she upsets the food, and it sort of scatters a little bit.
Right.
And then she turns around and she's sprinting back, and she's almost there when a colander is slapped over her on the floor, right at the cabinet. Like, she's almost there, and she bumps into it.
Ugh.
And little Fitzgibbons, a redheaded boy, has captured her in this colander, and he peers into it, and he says, Mom, don't let the cat in yet. I've caught a mouse. Can I keep it? She says, no, Billy, put it outside. And Justin says, damn. And he says, oh, come on, Mom, please. I can keep it in Porgy's old cage. Porgy, I assume, was the bird that used to live in this bird cage.
Sure.
So she says, oh, all right. And Justin says, I'll have to come back for you later. He's not planning on leaving her captured by the humans.
He's talking to us as much as he's letting the audience know.
So he climbs down from the bottle and takes off because he's got more work to do tonight. And we fade away with Mrs. Brisby captured by the child of the Fitzgibbons house.